Hi, my name is Kayla DesPortes, and today I will get to present some of the work that we did with CLARISA, examining the design and development of a social justice makerspace. I am an assistant professor at NYU Steinhardt.
And I'm Clarissa James. I'm the executive director of Divas for Social Justice.
And this is our whole research team.
All right, so Divas for Social Justice has actually been around for about 14 years, and DIVA stands for Digital Interactive Visual Arts and Sciences, right? And the mission of our organization is to empower youth in underserved communities to use technology for social change. And we've been doing that for 14 years. In 2019, our organization acquired a storefront, and with the help of NYU, we were able to turn it into a social justice makerspace. All right, on this next slide, you see Forward, our makerspace, and some of the projects that have successfully been achieved in that space through the entire community, and we're going to talk more about that. All right. So after the launch of our makerspace, we were able to extend our programming and develop it more with the Teen VR mentorship program and with the STEM Community Garden program, as well as the Urban Window Display and the COVID-19 Learning Lab. With the Teen VR mentorship program, it was something that we had before, but because we had this dedicated space now, we were able to serve teens all over New York City at the same time and offer free community workshops, teaching the whole community about virtual reality. And with the other components that you see on this page, we are going to get into more details about them.
All right, so in our timeline, we started working with CLARISA soon after she acquired the storefront in November of 2019. And we engaged with her in different planning sessions, trying to get to know one another, understand each other's values and goals, and really kind of integrate into the community that she had already built. We engaged in a design workshop where we brought in people from the local community, and the majority of the work is going to focus on the data that we gathered through that. We launched the space in June of 2019, and the program development has gone on since then. And like we mentioned, we're going to talk a little bit about some of those programs. So as we were engaging in this design process, we chose to take a participatory action research approach because we really wanted to work with CLARISA to kind of engage in this research exploration. And the main question that we were focused on was, how can a makerspace be positioned to address social inequities while supporting community growth and development? So we took a qualitative approach to this research. I'm not going to talk much in depth about it, but focusing on mostly the design team meetings and the community design workshop and doing a thematic coding analysis across the work. And so the community workshop, which was a significant portion of this data, was focused on teaching about design, fulfilling DIVA's educational component to their work, as well as engaging the community in design work to understand their perspectives on the goals for the makerspace. It was a 3-hour session with the community members, and we engaged 3 of the design team along with 8 of the local community residents, 4 youth and 4 adults in the community.
Okay. And some of the things that went into our community design workshop were that we wanted the participants to feel like it was a space that was designed by them, for them, including friends and family, a place where you could solve community issues through tech, and then also a place where you can explore your creativity. For me as the executive director, I found this both exhilarating and unnerving. I like that people were so willing to think outside of the box, but it was unnerving for me because of the financial constraints that I know our organization was facing.
And so the participants engaged with one another, serving as both a designer and a client for the design work, and this led to designs that then led to discussions about what the space could and should offer. And so we'll talk a little bit about the values and tensions that arose. Just really quickly, framing around social justice, we were really drawing on Loiter's definition of justice that was brought into the HCI community by Dombrowski and colleagues, thinking about justice as giving everyone their due. And they break it up into 6 dimensions, and we're going to focus on 3 of them, thinking about the ways makerspaces can be oriented. And so thinking about recognition of inequities and how makerspaces can engage in educating around injustices, thinking about how it can be situated as part of the distribution of resources within a community that can help develop community capacities, and how can it also enable capacity building, supporting people as they fulfill their potential and develop their own capacities. Additionally, we take this asset-based community development orientation focused on how do we build on what's already in the community and the individual, organizational, and associational resources and relationships. So there were 2 main designs that came out of the design work that the community engaged in during the workshop. I'm going to talk about one of them. This one we called the sidewalk makerspace. The participants both oriented around talking about the physical aspects of the space that they were designing, as well as the activities. And so for the physical space, like I mentioned, they were really interested in how they could engage in the community. And one of the ways was to expand onto the sidewalk so that people who were just walking by could be welcomed into the space and brought into the work that was being done. They focused on sustainability of the materials, so thinking about reusable furniture as well as configurable furniture that could be customized by the people who came into the space. Additionally, they brainstormed around different activities such as financial literacy classes, programmable LED displays that learners could learn to program, but then also develop messages and graphics to welcome people into the space. And then lastly, in this design, looking at creating this becoming me wardrobe, in which the idea was to engage youth in futuring and seeing how they could dress up as their different career aspirations. And through this, thinking about how that could then lead them into exploration of different careers. And the idea behind, in response to the Becoming Me wardrobe, there was also discussions about how the space or these activities could be used for career readiness outside of just futuring, such as using suits and clothing for interviews. And so there were many discussions that arose as these activities were presented and talked about. Additionally, the designs arose, out of the designs arose different tensions. One example is with the sidewalk makerspace. With how open it was designed to be, there was also a discussion of how do you then also promote safety within the space if just anybody is going to be welcomed in the space. And so through this, these designs and these design discussions, various values came out of the thematic coding analysis. And we aren't going to talk about all of them, but one of them is individual empowerment. And this is something that a lot of makerspaces would align with in terms of thinking about things that the values that they have, but the way that it manifested here was slightly different in that it was about addressing these structural and social inequities. For example, having those interview suits and making sure that financial literacy was part of the conversation. But then one of the key examples of how the programming has developed kind of with this ethos is the COVID Learning Lab.
Mm-hmm. So with the COVID Learning Lab, our organization received support through the CARES Act, through the government, to provide a safe space for local youth to do their remote learning during the day, right? So what we found was that the majority of youth that participated in the Learning Lab were either from foster care or had special needs. And the way that we as an organization were able to empower those youth was, number one, providing a safe space for them to be able to learn. Number two, working in conjunction with human services to make sure that their social, emotional wellness was met. And then number three, providing STEM enrichment activities once they finished their remote learning that also included them stepping a little bit outside and doing some gardening and doing some different things, but them participating in the learning lab actually prepared them more for the return to school.
Yeah, and so this is a direct example of that individual capacity building that the makerspace could be involved in, as well as an example of how the space and technology was part of this distribution of resources at a time when it was very essential for the community. And lastly, working with the human services is demonstrating how we can connect across assets as part of the ways that programming develops. The second value that we'll talk about is inclusion. And so for this example, we're going to use the urban window display.
The urban windows display is a great example of inclusion because, in fact, a local artist resident helped us develop this program, right? The local resident was actually worked for a major retailer and did window displays for them. And this individual brought their talents to our program and volunteered. And collectively, we decided, okay, this is a project that we could include all community members in. They would be responsible for changing our storefront design. And the way that we incorporated social justice was looking at the community issues we were facing at hand. Some of the issues that we captured through our window displays over the past 2 years have included the digital divide, Black Lives Matter, a sense of gratitude during Thanksgiving season, and environmental justice. But during the lockdown, right, with COVID-19, when New York City was locked down, a way that we were able to communicate with our residents, even though we were inside, was that we took some of their design ideas and we placed them in QR code design, and we placed them on the window display as well.
And so this demonstrates ways that these kinds of programs can go beyond what we currently envision. A lot of intergenerational discussion focuses on familial ties, and this tries to push beyond that to show how community can support one another. In addition, thinking about the recognition of inequalities as part of the educational programming that Divas puts on, that's what they did within the thematic focuses of each of the different window displays, because not only are the people learning about these different inequities through creating, but they're also sharing what they've learned with the community through the display that's in the community. And then lastly, we're going to share an example about community connectedness. So really thinking about building relationships between assets in the community.
So the example that you see here about community connectedness, it's a direct example of 2 community gardens that Divas for Social Justice has done projects with. The Garden of Resilience with the daffodils, we focused in on the idea of composting and food waste and educating that particular community about that through designing QR codes through our laser cutter, directly linked to our Makerspace to be able to educate that community about that process. And then the other image that you see is the South Jamaica Community Farms, where the youth that are there created a 360-degree video of their garden, so that people who were afraid to come out because of COVID-19 could still view their garden. In addition, they also added a QR code design that was laser cut that featured their voices explaining the different things that are grown in the garden and the health benefits of it.
And so in addition to these values that manifested in the work that we were doing, and that eventually worked its way into the programs, there were also tensions. And so an example of this is that of individual empowerment and community impact. And so this is different than most makerspaces because they're mostly focused on the individual empowerment and how do you make sure that people can do what they want in the space and use the tools that they want. But with the work we've been doing with Divas, it became clear that there was also a little bit of a tension between what is the time and space that we allow for kind of these individual activities compared to the ones that are very focused on these social action projects. And another example is diversity versus cultural preservation that arose as attention.
Mm-hmm. And what we explored there was, like, particularly in the community of Bedford-Stuyvesant, in the last 7 years, we've seen a lot of gentrification happen in that community. And that community actually has a very rich history, African-American history of leaders making a huge difference. And we felt that while diversity is very important to have in communities and be celebrated, we as an organization recognize the importance of cultural preservation. And one example of that is during the height of the pandemic, right? And all of the racial unrest that was happening in June 2020, where our office is located, a couple blocks away, there was a Black Lives Matter mural that was put down. So in solidarity, Divas for Social Justice decided that one of their window displays would be celebrating the Black Lives Matter movement.
And so you guys can all read more about these values and tensions in the paper. Feel free to contact myself and Clarissa about any questions you have, and we look forward to seeing you at the